The North Island Main Trunk Railway has played many roles in the development of the country and the regions and towns it once helped create. Midway between Auckland and Wellington, an obelisk marks the place where the trunk was finally linked up. Premier Sir Joseph Ward drove the last spike 23 years after work began. In 1908, the American Great White Fleet was making a world cruise as a show of strength. Down in Wellington, politicians were eager to take part in the jingoism. But there was a catch. The railway to Auckland, where the Americans would arrive, was not yet completed. Since 1885, several thousand men had been thrown at the task of closing the 200-mile gap between railheads. It had been a daunting task, requiring massive civil engineering to take the line up onto the remote central volcanic plateau, working in all extremes of weather. And now, after 23 years, the railheads were closing in on some of the most difficult terrain yet encountered. The question of how to get the politicians to Auckland now lay with civil engineer Frederick Furkett. "How would it be if I took you all the way by train?" asked Furkett. "Why, I'd give you £1,000 if you'd carry that through," replied the minister, Sir William Hall Jones. And so was struck one of the most controversial bets in New Zealand history, to be embedded for all time amid anecdote and legend of the parliamentary special. Furkett went away to work out how he could pull this one off, and authorities made plans for a special train to carry politicians and dignitaries to go and greet the Americans. The date was Friday the 7th of August 1908.
There was a whirl of bags, umbrellas, holdalls, rugs, sacred top hat cases, packets of sandwiches, hampers of bottles, feathers, whiskers, skirts, coattails. By the time that the train got its full complement of travellers, there were almost 200 people trying to settle down for the night.
At 10:05, the special set off on the 20-hour attempt to get through to Auckland along an unfinished railway on what some feared was a potentially dangerous journey.
August 1908, 3rd of August, the parliamentary train had to get through to Auckland to see the Great White Fleet. So unfortunately, due to storms and snowstorms and that, they couldn't finish the track between Horapito and Makatoti. Horapito is north of Ohakune. It would have been about 12 kilometres. Horapito now today is the Smash Palace where they made the film. The coach road would end it at Horapito and the main trunk ended there, so we had to have a gap between the Horapito and the Makatoti Viaduct. Incredible town, good railway town. There was a manned station there and had a ganger base there which worked all the way down from Horapito to Ohakune to make sure that it was safe for the night expresses to travel. Between Horapito and Makatoti, prior to the parliamentary special, there was no track, and it was just cleared for a track. The challenge was taken up, so Furkett built a temporary track between Horapito and the Makatoti, so the parliamentary special could get through.
So getting a steam train through this remote region had been exercising the considerable talents of Frederick Furkett ever since he'd accepted the famous challenge. Up here, the line under construction by the Public Works Department was on his watch. He'd inherited a medley of little engines, all fussing about on work trains. Getting old, but still useful, and small enough to operate a parliamentary special over light rails. Just the engines he needed to win a wager.
The terrain between the two places was level, There was no problem. There was no cuttings to be made. It was just a straight line run. And so a temporary track could be constructed quite easily. But unfortunately that was hampered also by the snow and terrible weather that took place days before the parliamentary special was going to go through. But anyhow, on the last Saturday, the weather cleared and the track was put through between Horapito and Makatoti in a very, very temporary way. There was no ballast under the track, laid on Manuka timber and also pungas in places. So the train, when it actually went across that portion, it had to have reduction in engines. So there's 3 smaller engines were used.
Amongst Furcutt's retinue of relics, 3 L engines would incredibly survive into the 21st century. In the first week of August 1908, 2 of these engines were at work up the line, north of the pioneer town of Ohakune.
Well, the parliamentary train went through on the 3rd of August, got through to Auckland all right, and it did return on the same track 10 days later. It come back to Wellington. But then, of course, the railways had to improve the track between Horapito and Makatoti, and that took 3 months to build the track and put the sleepers and ballast the track, and that was finished on the 6th of November 1908.
Just 3 months after the parliamentary special, Sir Joseph Ward was back to open the main trunk line. The rails had met just north of Pokaka, and people came from far and wide to celebrate.
So I arrived here Christmas in 1963, and they said, well, we're going to put a white cross up out at Tangiwai to commemorate 10 years of the Tangiwai rail disaster. Well, I was only 11 at the time, and I was sitting on the veranda at home in the house, and the gentleman across over the road come running up the drive of our house, and we looked around rather amazed, and we haven't seen him running for a while, and he said, oh, our express has gone into the river at Tangiwai, and a lot of people have been drowned. I said, what? Yes, so, oh gosh, my father was a man that liked railways. He said, oh, that is real bad, but I don't think we'll travel up there because there'll be a lot of people up there. We'll keep out of their road.
Ruapehu, one of 3 active volcanoes in the central North Island, that on Christmas Eve 1953 sent a huge lahar of rocks, ice, water and mud down the Whangaehu River, and at the Tangiwai rail bridge 151 people died.
We got a knock on our door, and it was railway men who were looking for a ride out to the accident site. They had heard of the accident, and they asked us would we take our car out. Not many railway men had a car at the time, and so and they all knew my mother fairly well, so they came and knocked on the door, and of course we ran them out. Anyhow, we got out to the site, and driving down we could see the cars parked. We got there probably as quick as anybody from Ohakune. I got out of the car and I made my way across to Carriage 4, which was laying exactly where the memorial is today. I could see it highlighted against the car lights on the other side of the river. There was no trees there at the time.
166 people died when tragedy struck an express train carrying holidaymakers from Wellington to Auckland. Water bursting out of a crater lake on Mount Ruapehu had washed away the foundations of a bridge. The locomotive and 6 of 9 carriages spilled into the raging torrent. Several families were wiped out and many bodies were not recovered for weeks.
As I moved across through the mud and slush, somebody yelled out that car had been searched. It was pitch black, but we managed to be able to see, and a lot of it was to do with these lights on the 3 carriages that were still on the track on the other side of the river, and those, it appeared that there was enough glow from those lights to sort of give us enough light so we could see our way round. I went back onto the road, and there they were calling for men to get into the back of a railway truck to take them round to the railway bridge where they were asking for help. So I jumped on the back of the truck. We drove round up through the forestry and round to the bridge. And when we got there, there was already 1 truck there with 2 forestry men in it, and they went ahead of us. They threw a fire hose down from the bridge down, and it was 7 metres down to down to the water level, and where we could stand. So we climbed down this fire hose down to the bottom. The water was right down. It was back into the river where the river should be flowing, in the river bed. Now when we got down to the bottom, I was the only one with the torch. So I was asked, would I get up into carriage 3, which had been cut in half and was sticking out into the river. There was carriage 3, then there was the girder of the bridge, and then there was the locomotive laying alongside. And it's still hissing, still making noises. As though it had been covered in water, or La had covered it, it was still making noises. I climbed up into the carriage with another chap, and we put the torch on, and it had been completely cleaned out. It had been just washed out. The door was open, and there was nothing in there, no body or anything else. There was 2 women that climbed out from Tamaranui. They had been travelling with their boyfriends. They searched around looking for their boyfriends, and a girl, Karam, had grabbed a handful of hair, pulled it up, and she pulled up the girl, Belle. They both made their way out through the door that I'd gone in to search. They came out through there. They sat onto the girder, and there they froze. So they got onto the locomotive, but there they burnt their feet. So they got back onto the girder, and there a couple of friends of mine came along and rescued them. I can't remember a lot of the night, and next morning, it came back to me. I remember getting on the truck to come back to Ohakune, the railway truck. I got a ride back into town. I can remember back home meeting my mother and friends and whatnot, and what happened Christmas Day. After leaving school, 1954, I joined the workforce, and I came back into the 3 cinemas in Ohakune, which I thoroughly loved and enjoyed. The Ohakune Junction one catered for the picture trains on a Saturday night, and apparently a Christmas Eve night as well. And the people would come in, and we catered for them, but we had to be out at 10 o'clock at night to get round the express. And that usually, the one going south would stop off at Rangataua, and they pass the express there. Ones going north would pass further up north, Pokak or Ero or somewhere up that way. And there's some great stories still of the people that actually travelled those trains. They thoroughly enjoyed it, their night out in Ohakune Junction.
About halfway between Taihape and Taumarunui, with its shops, cinema and junction for the Ratahi branch, Ohakune was the social centre for the isolated population living around the volcanic plateau. And what with picture trains converging from both north and south, some patrons inevitably got mixed up.
They jumped in the wrong carriage, and they'd gone to Taihape when they should have been going to Tamanui and vice versa. And that happened quite a few times, and quite a few people had to either come back on the express or the limited and get back somehow, or sometimes they'd come back in a guard's van on one of the other trains or something like that.
When we were in Ohakune, we used to go on the goods train to Horapito and then come home on the goods train after the dances. We used to go through to Rangataua and everywhere for them. I mean, they were days that were wonderful, clean days, weren't they?
They used to call it a picture train, and right from Tamaranui to Ohakune, it was a big picture theatre. They used to call it the Cat.
The carriage used to be on the back of a string of wagons, and we stopped at all the little stations en route and picked up the locals and got to Ohakune. We used to leave here at 5 o'clock and get to Ohakune at 7. And everyone emptied out and went to the pictures.
But as my mother said to me, there's something happening, and that's TV's coming. And she said there won't be enough in the cinemas to keep us both. But we kept the cinemas going. And so we kept the Ohakune Junction one going until 1967. We kept Ratahi going until 1994. And Ohakune we kept going into 2014, which was when digital hit the cinema world and just took over overnight. For us to change to that would be 100,000 or more, and we weren't at our age of 70 odd prepared to do that. So we retired.